Kevin Miller stumbles out of the courtroom, eyes burning from the tears of losing his daughter. As his world crumbles around him, a filthy, desperate girl blocks his path. "Sir, I know how to get your daughter back," she whispers, her voice sharp and haunting. Kevin scoffs and walks away, dismissing her words as madness. But soon something happens that forces him to reconsider everything, and the truth she holds could be the key to his salvation, or his ultimate downfall. Want to know what happened? Watch until the end and don't miss this story full of emotions and unexpected twists. Also, tell us where you're watching from, write it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more exciting stories like this one. Kevin Miller's heart pounded against his chest as he stumbled out of the courtroom, his legs barely holding him up. The harsh fluorescent lights of the courthouse hallway blurred into a dizzying mess of white and gray. His breathing was shallow, his hands trembling as he clutched the stack of useless legal documents against his chest. Documents that had done nothing to sway the judge's decision. He had lost. The word kept echoing through his mind, a merciless taunt that drowned out the world around him. His ex-wife's high-powered attorneys had shredded every heartfelt plea he made to keep custody of his beloved daughter, Amelia. His ex-wife, Vanessa, had smiled with that sharp, satisfied smirk of hers when the verdict was announced. It was as if she'd known all along how this would end, and perhaps she had. With her money, her connections, her relentless desire to punish him for daring to leave her. Kevin's steps were heavy, his shoulders slumped, his face pale. The courthouse doors swung open, and the chilly autumn air hit him like a slap. It did nothing to clear his head. Nothing could. He'd failed his little girl. His fingers shook as he reached for his phone, its screen still dark. There was no one to call, no one who could help him now. Not after his last desperate hope had crumbled. Into nothing. His lawyer's words echoed in his head, hollow and useless. "We'll appeal, Kevin, this isn't over." But it sure felt over. He stumbled toward his car, his vision blurred by tears he refused to let fall. Amelia's face swam before his, eyes her laughter, her tiny fingers wrapping around his hand, her sleepy voice whispering, "Good night, Daddy." All of it ripped away by a legal system that seemed designed to crush men like him. "Sir, I know how to get your daughter back." The voice was weak but clear, cutting through the haze of despair that surrounded him. Kevin blinked, turning his head toward the sound. A girl stood just a few feet away, her clothes dirty and torn, her hair a tangled mess framing a gaunt face. She couldn't have been older than 11, her eyes wide and desperate, glimmering with something that looked like both terror and determination. "Please," she said, her voice cracking. "I know how to help you." Kevin stared at her, confusion and disbelief battling against the emptiness inside him. Another con artist, he told himself, another vulture circling a broken man. But something about the way her eyes searched his face, the sheer panic etched into her features, held him frozen in place. "Why would you—" Kevin started to say, but the words tangled in his throat. "Because it's about her, too," the girl whispered, her voice trembling. "Are your ex-wife— She ruined my life, too." Kevin's heart thudded painfully. This had to be a mistake, a cruel joke. But the girl's gaze held his, refusing to let him turn away. Kevin's gaze locked onto the girl's small, dirt-smudged face. Her eyes were too old for her age, shadowed by something far darker than mere hardship. She looked like she hadn't eaten a proper meal in days. Her tiny frame swallowed by clothes 2 sizes too big, ragged and stained from living on the streets. "What's your name?" Kevin asked, his voice sounding far away, even to his own. "Ears, Brenda," she replied softly. I've been looking for you. I thought maybe you'd listen." Her words tumbled out in a rush, her voice trembling as if she expected him to walk away at any moment. And Kevin wanted to. He wanted to shut out her pleading gaze, return to his cold, empty apartment and wallow in his own misery. But there was something in the way Brenda's shoulders hunched forward, the way she held herself as if bracing for a blow. "You said you could help me get Amelia back," Kevin said, his voice more skeptical than curious. "Yes," Brenda nodded. Her dirty hands clenched into fists at her sides. "Your ex-wife, Vanessa, she's my aunt." Kevin's eyes narrowed, suspicion flaring like a match in the dark. And why should I believe you? Because she took me from my family when I was little, lied about everything, said they were dead. I ran away when I found out the truth. But she's still looking for me. Kevin shook his head, the story too wild, too twisted to be real. But the fear in Brenda's eyes was real enough, and the bitterness with which she spoke Vanessa's name was something Kevin understood all too well. If Vanessa's your aunt, why come to me? Because you're the only one who can stop her, Brenda whispered, her voice breaking. You have money, lawyers, power, and because I heard her talking about what she was planning to do to you, to make sure you'd never see Amelia again. Kevin's blood ran cold. His fists clenched at his sides, a surge of rage and desperation flooding through him. Could this child really be telling the truth? Or was it all some elaborate scheme? But what if it wasn't? What if this girl was his only chance to fight back? All right, he said, his voice low and steady. Start from the beginning. Tell me everything. Brenda's shoulders trembled as she took a cautious step closer to Kevin. For a moment, he could see past the grime and ragged clothing. A child overwhelmed by fear, but driven by something far stronger, hope. It all started when I was little, Brenda began, her voice small and unsteady. I don't remember much, but I remember the house. It was big, with fancy rooms and loud voices. Vanessa's voice. Kevin crossed his arms over his chest, his eyes narrowing. His skepticism battled against the curiosity clawing at him. The courthouse parking lot was mostly empty now, the icy wind biting through his thin jacket. Still, he couldn't bring himself to walk away from the strange, desperate girl in front of him. She told me my parents were dead, that she was the only one who could take care of me, Brenda continued, her voice trembling. But the way she looked at me, it was like I was some kind of problem she needed to hide. Not family. Kevin studied her, his jaw clenched. Everything about this encounter felt surreal. A girl so young, looking like she hadn't eaten in days, telling him his ex-wife was her aunt and had stolen her from her real parents. It sounded like a twisted fairy tale. And yet, the pain in her eyes was real. I overheard her talking one night, Brenda went on, her gaze dropping to the cracked pavement. She was on the phone. She said something about how I shouldn't exist, how she needed to get rid of me before someone started asking questions. A chill ran down Kevin's spine. He wanted to dismiss her words, to tell her she was mistaken, confused. But Vanessa was ruthless. He knew that much too well. Why? Come to me, Kevin pressed, his tone harsher than he intended. If Vanessa's as powerful as you say, then what could I possibly do? Brenda looked up at him, her eyes shimmering with tears. Because you're the only one who would listen, the only one who knows what she's really like. I heard about what she did to you, how she made everyone think you're a terrible father. I thought maybe you'd believe me. Kevin's fists clenched at his sides. The wounds from the custody battle were still raw, the bitterness of betrayal still fresh. If Vanessa really had this child under her control, what else was she capable of? But trusting a stranger's story, especially one as wild as this, was a dangerous leap. He glanced around, his instincts prickling. Something about the way Brenda kept glancing nervously over her shoulder unsettled him. Where are you staying? Kevin asked finally. Nowhere, Brenda whispered. Just wherever I can. I've been hiding since I ran away. Kevin swallowed, his conscience warring with his caution. He couldn't just take a homeless girl off the streets based on a story that might not even be true. Listen, Brenda, I don't know if I can help you. This is all too much. You should go to the police. I tried, she cried, her voice cracking. But she's got people everywhere. You don't get it. She's been looking for me, and if she finds me... Brenda's words dissolved into frantic sobs, her thin shoulders shaking. Kevin took a step back, his own turmoil mirrored in the child's desperate face. I need some time to think about this, he said, his voice strained. Just stay safe, and if you're telling the truth, then I'll find a way to help you somehow. Brenda's expression collapsed, but she nodded slowly. Okay, she whispered. I'll be around. Just, please, don't take too long. Kevin watched as she turned and shuffled away, her fragile form vanishing into the shadows of the city. His chest tightened with guilt and uncertainty. Maybe she was lying, maybe she was just another person trying to manipulate him while he was at his lowest. But maybe, just maybe, she was his only chance to fight back against Vanessa. And if he ignored her, she might not survive to ask for help again. The night was colder than usual. Kevin lay awake in his apartment, his mind replaying the desperate look in Brenda's eyes over and over. Her voice haunted him, her words echoing like a relentless drumbeat. He should have done something, at least offered her a warm meal or a safe place to sleep for the night. Instead, he let her walk away into the darkness, leaving his conscience heavy with guilt. What kind of man was he, refusing to help a child so clearly lost and terrified? But the doubts kept gnawing at him. What if her story was all just a sick game to manipulate him? He'd been warned about desperate people trying to take advantage of his ruined reputation, but no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't get Brenda's pleading eyes out of his mind. Kevin spent the night tossing and turning, half awake and fully miserable. His phone rang at the crack of dawn, its sharp tone cutting through the fog of his sleepless night. "Mr. Miller?" an unfamiliar voice asked, sounding strained. "I'm calling from St. Mary's Hospital. A young girl was brought in early. This morning, her name's Brenda. She had your name and phone number written on a piece of paper in her pocket. She's asking for you." Kevin's stomach twisted. Brenda. His hands shook as he gripped the phone tighter. "What happened?" "She was found outside your building. Some teenagers saw her getting shoved around by two men and called for help. By the time anyone got there, the men were gone, and she was left alone, bruised and scared." Kevin's breath hitched. "Is she okay?" "She's shaken up, but mostly just bruised. She's got a sprained wrist and some nasty scrapes, but nothing's broken. We patched her up, but she keeps asking for you. Says it's important." Kevin was already throwing on his clothes. "I'm on my way." The drive to the hospital was a blur, his pulse thundering in his ears. Guilt chewed away at him, a constant reminder that he'd failed her. She'd reached out to him, practically begged him to listen, and he'd let her walk away unprotected. He burst into the emergency room, breathless and wild-eyed. A nurse led him down a narrow hallway to a small room where Brenda sat curled up on the hospital bed. Her knees were drawn to her chest, her arms wrapped around them like a fragile shield. Her right wrist was bandaged and supported by a cheap splint, her face dotted with fresh bruises and scratches. When Brenda's gaze met his, relief flooded her expression. "You came," she whispered, her voice cracked but steady. "I'm here," Kevin said, his own voice hoarse. "I'm so sorry, Brenda. I should have—" "It's not your fault," she interrupted, though the words trembled on her lips. "They found me. They were looking for me. Vanessa's people. They said if I didn't stop talking, to you it'd be worse next time." Kevin's fists clenched at his sides, rage bubbling beneath his skin. This was Vanessa's doing. Her reach extended far beyond the courtroom. She was willing to hurt a child just to protect her secrets. Kevin's jaw tightened. "Brenda, I won't let her hurt you again. I swear. From now on you're staying with me, and we're going to take her down. Together." Brenda stared at him, her eyes wide with a mixture of hope and disbelief. But even through her pain, she managed a small, grateful nod. For the first time, Kevin felt his anger shift into something stronger, determination. This wasn't just about Amelia anymore. It was about making sure no child ever suffered at Vanessa's hands again. Kevin's apartment was quiet and sterile, a far cry from the warmth it once held when Amelia's laughter filled the rooms. But now, as he guided Brenda inside, her tiny steps hesitant and shaky, it felt like the most important place in the world. "Sit down, make yourself comfortable," Kevin said awkwardly, gesturing toward the worn-out leather couch. Brenda nodded, her eyes darting around the unfamiliar space, as if expecting Vanessa's shadow to emerge from the walls. She looked exhausted. Bruises darkened her pale skin, and the bandage around her wrist served as a cruel reminder of how vulnerable she truly was. Kevin's guilt twisted like a knife in his chest. He'd let her walk away that night, scared and alone, only to end up nearly broken by Vanessa's thugs. "Are you hungry?" he asked, his voice softer now. Brenda's eyes widened a little. "Yeah, I haven't eaten since yesterday." Kevin disappeared into the kitchen, throwing together whatever he could find. Toast, scrambled eggs, some fruit he'd almost forgotten was in the fridge. When he placed the plate in front of her, Brenda stared at it like it was the most precious thing in the world. "Thank you," she murmured before digging in. Her small hands trembled as she ate, like a stray dog still expecting to be chased away. Kevin sat down across from her, his gaze heavy with concern. "I need you to tell me more, Brenda, about everything. I need to know what we're dealing with." Brenda swallowed, her shoulders tightening. "Vanessa kept me locked away for years. She made me call her Aunt Vanessa, but she never treated me like family, more like something to hide. She told me my parents were dead, but I don't think that's true, not anymore." Kevin's hands tightened into fists. His hatred for Vanessa deepened with every word. "Why do you think she took you?" "I overheard her talking with someone, a man named Mr. Harper. I think he was a lawyer or something. They were arguing about documents, something about inheritance, and how I was a problem that needed to be handled." Kevin's mind raced. "Do you remember anything else? Addresses, names, anything that could help us prove this?" Brenda closed her eyes, her face scrunched with concentration. "There was a big safe in her study. I never saw inside, but she always kept papers in there. Important stuff." Kevin nodded slowly. If those documents were still there, they could be the key to destroying Vanessa's web of lies. But he needed to know more. "Brenda," he said carefully, "would you be willing to try something to help you remember more? Like hypnotherapy, it's safe. It might help unlock more of your memories." Brenda looked at him, eyes full of fear and hope. "I'll try. If it means stopping her, I'll try anything." Kevin reached out, his hand gentle on her shoulder. "We'll do this together, I promise." For the first time since the nightmare began, Kevin felt something close to hope. And he wasn't going to waste it. The sterile office of Dr. Caldwell, a reputable hypnotherapist Kevin had hired, was the complete opposite of the chaos that had consumed his life recently. Everything about the place radiated calm, soft lighting, cushioned chairs, the faint scent of lavender in the air. Yet Kevin's nerves were strung tight as he watched Brenda settle into the recliner, her small body looking even smaller in the oversized chair. "Are you sure about this?" Kevin asked, his voice tense. He hated the idea of putting Brenda through anything that might cause her more pain. Brenda nodded, determination etched across her pale face. "If this helps me remember, I want to do it. I need to." Dr. Caldwell smiled gently, her kind eyes meeting Brenda's. "Don't worry, sweetheart. This isn't going to hurt. I'll guide you through some memories, but you're always in control. If it gets too much, just let me know and we'll stop." Brenda swallowed and gave a shaky nod. Kevin held his breath as the session began. "Doctor." Caldwell's voice was smooth, rhythmic, a calm river washing over Brenda's restless mind. As the minutes stretched on, Brenda's body relaxed, her breathing deep and even. "Now, Brenda," Dr. Caldwell said softly, "I want you to go back to the place where you remember hearing Vanessa's voice, a place where you felt trapped. Can you see it?" Brenda's brows furrowed, her fingers twitching slightly. "Yes, it's the study, Vanessa's study. It smells like leather and something sharp, like chemicals." Kevin leaned forward, his heartbeat thudding painfully. "What do you see in the study?" Dr. Caldwell asked gently. Brenda's voice trembled, but her words flowed with a strange clarity. "Papers, locked in a big safe. Vanessa always kept it hidden. She was so scared someone would find them." "What kind of papers, Brenda?" "I don't know, but Mr. Harper was there once. They were arguing. He said something about inheritance, how Vanessa needed to keep me quiet so the truth would stay buried." Kevin felt his fists clench. Inheritance. So that's what this was about. Vanessa had stolen Brenda's life to protect some twisted claim over wealth or power. "Do you remember anything else?" "Anything about Mr. Harper?" Dr. Caldwell asked. "He was scary, always looking at me like I was something rotten. He wanted me gone. He said Vanessa was playing with fire, keeping me around, that if anyone found out, she'd lose everything." Tears began to leak from the corners of Brenda's closed eyes. Kevin's chest tightened painfully, his fury burning hot and raw. "All right, Brenda," Dr. Caldwell's voice was soothing. "You've done well. I'm going to count to 5, and when I reach 5, you'll wake up feeling calm and safe." The therapist's countdown was slow and deliberate, and Brenda's eyes fluttered open, her gaze confused and dazed. Kevin reached for her hand, his grip gentle but firm. "You did great," Kevin said, his voice choked with emotion. "Better than great." Brenda's lips quivered. "I remember more now. I want to help you stop her. For good." "And we will," Kevin promised. "But first we need those documents. They're the proof we need to expose her." The next few days were a blur of preparation. Kevin enlisted the help of a private investigator to locate the mansion Brenda had described. Meanwhile, Brenda's courage grew. She was still a child, fragile and hurting, but now she had something stronger than fear. She had purpose. Kevin made the arrangements. Soon they would go back to that house of nightmares and uncover the secrets Vanessa had so carefully buried. Whatever it took, Kevin's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. The old mansion loomed ahead, its grandeur twisted by years of neglect. Overgrown hedges clawed at the iron fence, and the once imposing structure now looked like something out of a nightmare. But this was no nightmare. This was where Brenda's nightmare had been real. Beside him, Brenda stared at the house with wide, fearful eyes. Her fingers clutched the edge of her seat, but her voice remained steady. "It's the same, just like I remember." Kevin swallowed hard. "You don't have to go in there, Brenda. I can do this alone." "No," she replied, her voice trembling but determined. "I need to see for myself. I need to remember everything, and you need me to find that safe." Kevin hesitated, but he saw the courage in her young face. Brenda had already suffered enough because of Vanessa. This was her chance to reclaim her own story. "All right," he said, nodding. "Let's do this." They slipped through the side gate, the rusted metal groaning under Kevin's push. The air was thick and stale, a heavy silence pressing down on them. Windows loomed like dark, watchful eyes, and every creak of the old house seemed to echo their presence. Brenda led the way, her small footsteps eerily sure. Kevin kept close, his nerves frayed, his heartbeat pounding in his ears. As they reached the back entrance, Kevin jimmied the lock with a tool he'd borrowed from his investigator. It clicked open with an unsettling ease. The inside was worse than Kevin had imagined. Dust coated every surface, and the air reeked of mildew and something metallic. The grandeur of the place was long gone, replaced by decay and darkness. "The study is this way," Brenda whispered, her voice barely a breath. "Vanessa kept it locked most of the time. But I remember." They crept down a narrow hallway until they reached a heavy wooden door. Brenda pointed at it, her hand shaking. "It's in there." Kevin pushed the door open and the room yawned before them. Leather-bound books lined the shelves, their spines cracked and faded. A large mahogany desk stood in the center, but Brenda's eyes went straight to the far wall. "There," she said, nodding toward a painting that hung awkwardly, slightly off-center. "The safe's behind that." Kevin's pulse quickened. "Good eye." He crossed the room and lifted the painting, away revealing a small metal door embedded in the wall. It was older than he expected, the dial scratched and worn. "How do we open it?" Brenda asked, her voice trembling. "I have something for that," Kevin replied, pulling a compact but powerful electric lock cracker from his bag. "Give me a minute." He worked quickly, the device's faint hum filling the oppressive silence. Seconds felt like hours. Brenda hovered close, her eyes locked on the safe, as if it held all the answers she'd spent years searching for. Click. The safe door swung open, revealing stacks of documents, folders, and even a few old photographs. Kevin's hands shook as he rifled through the papers. Contracts, bank statements, a will. But what caught his attention was a file labeled Custody, Agreement, Miller, and another marked Harper Estate Control. "Here," Kevin said, his voice breathless. "This is it. Proof that Vanessa manipulated everything to steal Amelia from me. And more than that, evidence that she's been hiding you, covering up something even bigger." Brenda's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded fiercely. "We have to get out of here. If Vanessa knows we're here—" A sudden noise sliced through the air, heavy footsteps from somewhere above. "Go! Now!" Kevin hissed, shoving the documents into his bag. They bolted from the room, their footsteps echoing through the decaying mansion. As they burst through the back door and into the overgrown garden, Kevin heard the distant shout of angry voices. Vanessa's people had arrived, and they were out for blood, but he had what he needed. And this time Vanessa's empire was going to crumble. Kevin's apartment was a mess of scattered papers, hastily written notes, and the frantic energy of desperation. After the harrowing escape from the mansion, he and Brenda had spent days sorting through the stolen documents, piecing together the full extent of Vanessa's crimes. But there was no time to waste. They needed to act before Vanessa tried something even worse. "Are you sure about this?" Kevin asked for the 10th time, his eyes fixed on Brenda's small, determined face. She nodded, her gaze steady, despite the fear flickering behind her eyes. "If we don't do this now, she'll find a way to make everything disappear, just like she always does." Kevin's jaw tightened. Brenda was right. Vanessa's power, money, and influence had shielded her from consequences for far too long. The evidence they'd found was damning. Fraudulent custody agreements, bribes to corrupt lawyers like Mr. Harper, and clear proof that Brenda had been hidden away to keep her inheritance from ever reaching her. But even with all of that, there was no guarantee they would win. Vanessa's lawyers were ruthless, and her reach extended deep into the legal system. But Kevin had something Vanessa could never understand. He had the truth, and he had Brenda's courage. The day of the hearing came quickly, tension building like a storm. Kevin, Brenda, and Mr. Foster, his lawyer, walked through the courthouse doors, their footsteps echoing on the polished marble floor. Brenda's hand clung to Kevin's arm, her grip trembling but determined. They entered the courtroom where Vanessa sat flanked by her high-powered legal team. She wore a crisp, cold smile that didn't reach her eyes, but Kevin could see the nervous flicker beneath her mask. She hadn't expected him to fight back. The hearing began with the formalities, Mr. Foster presenting their case with calm precision. "Your Honor, we are here today to present undeniable evidence of Ms. Vanessa Carter's illegal actions, including abduction, fraudulent manipulation of legal documents, and financial conspiracy aimed at controlling the inheritance of a child she had no right to keep." Vanessa's attorney shot to his feet, his voice dripping with contempt. "These accusations are baseless. This man is a bitter father, trying to use a vulnerable child to regain custody of his own daughter. This entire case is built on falsehoods and manipulation." "Then let's hear it from the child herself," Mr. Foster said calmly. "I call Brenda Thompson to the stand." Kevin's heart raced as Brenda's small frame made its way to the witness stand. She looked even younger beneath the harsh fluorescent lights, but her expression was fierce and focused. "Please state your name for the record," Mr. Foster prompted gently. "Brenda Thompson," she replied, her voice soft but clear. "Can you tell us what happened to you, Brenda? How you came to live with Vanessa Carter?" Brenda's eyes flickered to Vanessa, whose icy glare tried to bore holes through her. But Brenda didn't flinch. She drew a shaky breath and spoke. "She told me my parents were dead, that I was all alone, and she was the only one who could take care of me. But she never treated me like family. I was locked away, never allowed outside. She said it was for my own good, but I knew it was wrong." "Did you ever hear her discussing why you were being kept hidden?" Mr. Foster pressed. "Yes." Brenda's fingers twisted nervously around each other. "She talked to a man named Mr. Harper a lot. They were always arguing. He said I needed to be gone, that if anyone found out who I was, Vanessa would lose everything." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Vanessa's expression had shifted from fury to panic. The cracks were starting to show. "And what happened when you tried to escape?" "She sent men after me. They hurt me." Brenda's voice trembled, but she pushed through. "They told me to stay away from Kevin, that if I kept talking, they'd make me disappear." Kevin's fists clenched beneath the table, fury burning in his veins. But Brenda's courage never wavered. Mr. Foster turned to the judge. "Your Honor, we would like to submit into evidence the documents retrieved from Ms. Carter's mansion. They include financial records proving a conspiracy to eliminate Brenda as a legal heir, along with falsified custody agreements that were used to rob Mr. Miller of his daughter, Amelia." The papers were handed over. Photographs of the documents were displayed on the projector, each one a dagger aimed directly at Vanessa's empire of lies. The courtroom was deathly silent as Vanessa's lawyers scrambled to find any ground to stand on. But the truth was too powerful to ignore. Vanessa shot to her feet, her voice shrill and desperate. "This is insane. That little brat is a liar. She's only here because this man put her up to it." But her outburst only cemented her guilt. The judge's gaze was cold and unforgiving. "Ms. Carter, I suggest you sit down and remain silent unless you wish to add contempt of court to the charges now pending against you." Vanessa sank into her seat, her face twisted with fury and terror. Kevin glanced at Brenda, his heart swelling, with pride and something else. "Hope," the judge spoke, his tone heavy with finality. "Based on the evidence presented today, this court finds sufficient grounds to open a criminal investigation against Vanessa Carter and her associates. Furthermore, custody of Amelia Miller is to be returned to her father, Kevin Miller, effective immediately. As for Brenda Thompson, she will be placed under Mr. Miller's protection pending further investigation into her legal guardianship and inheritance rights." Kevin's breath caught in his throat, his eyes burning with tears he refused to shed. It was over. They had won. Brenda turned to him, her eyes shimmering with disbelief and relief. "We did it," she whispered. Kevin squeezed her hand, his voice thick with emotion. "You did it, Brenda. You were brave enough to face her. And now, it's over." Brenda's tears spilled over, but this time they were tears of freedom. Sunlight poured through the kitchen window, painting everything in warm golden hues. Laughter bubbled up from the living room, light and free, the sound of innocence restored. Kevin leaned against the counter, a smile tugging at his lips as he listened to Amelia's giggles mingling with Brenda's softer but no less joyful laughter. It had been 6 months since the trial. 6 months since Vanessa's empire of lies crumbled to dust. She was awaiting sentencing, her influence and power shattered beyond repair. Brenda had been officially placed under Kevin's guardianship, and the adoption process was already underway. The little girl who had once been nothing but shadows and fear was now thriving. Her cheeks were fuller, her eyes brighter, and her smile, her genuine, unburdened smile, was a miracle Kevin never took for granted. "Dad, Brenda made cookies!" Amelia called, her small feet pattering against the wooden floor as she rushed into the kitchen with a chocolate-smudged grin. "Yeah, but she ate most of the chocolate chips before we even started baking," Brenda added, following close behind. With a playful roll of her eyes, Kevin chuckled. "Guess that means you two owe me a few cookies." Brenda's smile turned shy but steady. "Fine, I'll make a new batch tomorrow, but only if you help." "It's a deal." Kevin ruffled her hair, warmth swelling in his chest. She was finally safe, finally home. As the afternoon drifted by in peaceful simplicity, Kevin couldn't help but feel like his life had been stitched back together. Not the way it was before. No, it was something new, something better, because now he had Amelia, and now he had Brenda, and nothing would ever tear them apart again. Thank you so much for watching this story all the way to the end. It really means a lot. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more like it, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another video. We put a lot of heart into creating these stories for you, and your support truly keeps us going. And hey, if this story moved you, let us know by giving it a thumbs up and leaving a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks again for being here. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.